The video spread like wildfire across America. 47 million views in 72 hours. Comment sections exploding with rage. News anchors interrupting their broadcasts to show the footage again and again. A nation united in disbelief, watching a 23-year-old man in a designer jacket shove an 81-year-old war veteran to the ground outside a Providence grocery store. His name was Brandon Mercer. And by the time the sun set that Thursday evening, every corner of America knew his face. It happened on a crisp October afternoon on Atwells Avenue, in the heart of Federal Hill, Providence, Rhode Island. The kind of neighborhood where everyone knows everyone. Where old Italian bakeries sit next to family-owned delis. Where respect isn't just expected, it's demanded. Harold Whitmore had lived on that street for 53 years. At 81, he still walked to DiMaggio's market every Tuesday and Thursday to buy fresh bread, a small carton of milk, and the daily newspaper. His routine was sacred. His presence was beloved. The shop owners would wave at him from their windows. Children on their way home from school would stop to hear his stories about Korea, about the medals he earned, about the friends he buried in frozen soil thousands of miles from home. Harold never boasted. He never asked for anything. He simply lived with the quiet dignity of a man who had given everything to his country and never once complained about what little he received in return. That Thursday, Harold was leaving DiMaggio's with his small paper bag clutched against his chest when a black BMW screeched into the handicapped parking spot directly in front of the store. The driver's door swung open, nearly striking Harold's walker. "Hey," Harold said, his voice calm but firm. "Son, that's a handicapped spot. You can't park there." Brandon Mercer stepped out. 23 years old. 6'2". A gold chain hanging from his neck. Sunglasses that cost more than Harold's monthly pension. He looked at the old man the way one might look at an insect. "Mind your business, old man. I'm just saying there are rules." I said, "Mind your business." What happened next was captured by 3 separate security cameras, 2 smartphones from witnesses across the street, and the dashcam of a delivery truck parked nearby. Brandon Mercer placed both hands on Harold Whitmore's chest and shoved. The elderly veteran stumbled backward, his walker twisting beneath him, his frail body colliding with the concrete sidewalk. His head struck the curb. His grocery bag split open, sending bread rolling into the gutter and milk pooling around his trembling hands. For a moment, the world seemed to stop. Harold lay there, gasping, blood trickling from a gash above his left eye. His Korean War veteran cap, the one he wore every single day, rolled into the street. Brandon Mercer didn't even look back. He walked into the store, bought a pack of cigarettes, and walked out 5 minutes later, stepping over Harold's walker as paramedics rushed to the scene. The injuries were severe. A fractured hip, 3 broken ribs, a concussion, internal bleeding that required emergency surgery. For 11 days, Harold Whitmore lay in Rhode Island Hospital, hooked to machines, surrounded by flowers and cards from neighbors, veterans organizations, and strangers who had seen the video and wept. The doctors said he was lucky to be alive. But Harold, even from his hospital bed, refused to say a harsh word about the young man who had hurt him. "He's lost," Harold whispered to a reporter who had come to interview him. "Somewhere along the way, that boy got lost. I don't hate him. I just hope someone finds him before it's too late." The public, however, was not so forgiving. Within hours of the video going viral, Brandon Mercer's identity was uncovered. His Instagram was flooded with hundreds of thousands of comments. His LinkedIn was screenshot and shared with his employer. His apartment building was surrounded by protesters holding signs that read, "Justice for Harold," and "Respect our veterans." Politicians weighed in. Veterans groups demanded maximum prosecution. Cable news devoted entire segments to analyzing every second of the footage, freezing on the moment of impact, on Harold's face as he fell, on Brandon's cold indifference as he walked away. And then came the discovery that changed everything. Brandon Mercer wasn't just some entitled rich kid. He was the son of Captain Daniel Mercer, the newly appointed chief of the Providence Police Department. The same department responsible for arresting him. The same department now under intense scrutiny for how they would handle one of their own. The outrage doubled, then tripled. Accusations of corruption filled the airwaves. Protesters gathered outside the police headquarters. National media descended on Providence like vultures circling wounded prey. And at the center of it all stood Judge Frank Caprio, the legendary municipal court judge, known across the country for his viral videos of compassionate rulings, his gentle humor, his tears when confronted with human tragedy. The judge who had made millions believe that justice could be both firm and kind. Now, the entire nation waited to see what he would do. Would he bow to pressure? Would he protect the son of the police chief? Would he deliver the justice that Harold Whitmore and America deserved? The trial date was set. November 14th. Courtroom 3. Every seat was claimed within minutes of the announcement. But a revelation no one expected was about to change everything that happened in that tribunal. The Providence Municipal Courthouse had never seen a morning like this. By 6 a.m., a line stretched around the block. Reporters, activists, veterans in their old uniforms, ordinary citizens who had taken the day off work just to witness history. Police barricades lined the streets. News helicopters circled overhead. Satellite trucks from CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, and every major network claimed every available parking space within a quarter mile. Inside Courtroom 3, the air was thick with tension. Every wooden bench was filled. Every standing spot along the walls was occupied. Sketch artists sharpened their pencils. Journalists clutched their notebooks. In the front row, members of Harold Whitmore's family sat in dignified silence. His daughter Margaret, his grandson Timothy, his sister-in-law Ruth, all of them wearing small American flag pins on their lapels. And in a wheelchair near the center aisle, Harold Whitmore himself. He had insisted on attending. Against his doctor's advice, against his family's protests, he had demanded to be there. His face was still bruised. His left arm was in a sling. A bandage covered the stitches above his eye. But his back was straight, and his eyes were clear. He was a soldier. He would face his enemy. At exactly 9 a.m., the side door opened, and Judge Frank Caprio entered. 78 years old. Silver hair. Glasses perched on his nose. That familiar face that had launched 1,000 viral videos, that had made people around the world laugh and cry and believe in the goodness of the American justice system. But today, there was no warmth in his expression. Today, Judge Caprio looked like a man carrying the weight of an entire nation on his shoulders. "All rise," the bailiff announced. The courtroom stood. Judge Caprio took his seat, adjusted his microphone, and looked out at the sea of faces before him. He took a long breath. Then he spoke. "This court is now in session. We are here today in the matter of the state of Rhode Island versus Brandon Daniel Mercer, charged with assault causing serious bodily injury, assault on an elderly person, and disorderly conduct. Mr. Mercer, please approach." The side door opened again. Brandon Mercer walked in. If the nation expected remorse, they were immediately disappointed. Brandon wore a tailored charcoal suit that probably cost $3,000. His hair was perfectly styled. His jaw was set in a hard line, and his eyes swept across the courtroom with something that looked almost like annoyance, as if this whole proceeding was an inconvenience, a minor interruption in his otherwise important life. He didn't look at Harold. He didn't look at the family. He looked at his phone until a bailiff confiscated it, and then he slouched into his chair beside his defense attorney with a sigh so audible that several people in the gallery gasped. Judge Caprio watched all of this. His expression didn't change, but those who knew him well could see the storm building behind his eyes. "Mr. Mercer," the judge said calmly, Do you understand the charges against you? Brandon's attorney began to stand, but Brandon waved him off. Yeah, Brandon said. I understand. Look, Your Honor, this whole thing has been blown way out of proportion. I barely touched the guy. He's old. He fell. That's not my fault. People fall all the time. I'm being made an example of because of who my father is. This is political persecution, plain and simple. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Judge Caprio raised his hand for silence. Mr. Mercer, he said, his voice still measured, I have reviewed the video evidence. I have read the medical reports. I have studied the witness statements. Do you genuinely believe that you barely touched Mr. Whitmore? Brandon shrugged. He was in my way. I moved him. He's 80-something years old. Maybe he should stay home if he can't handle being outside. Margaret Whitmore let out a sob. Harold placed his trembling hand on her arm, steadying her. Judge Caprio's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Mr. Mercer, the man you assaulted is a decorated veteran of the Korean War. He served this country with honor for over 3 decades. He received a Purple Heart, a Bronze Star, and a commendation from President Nixon himself. He has spent his entire life giving to others, to his community, to his family, to strangers he never even met. And you stand here, in this courtroom, and suggest that he should stay home? Brandon rolled his eyes. With all due respect, Your Honor, I don't care if he fought in every war since the Revolution. That doesn't give him the right to tell me where to park. I pay taxes. I have rights too. The courtroom erupted. Shouts rang out from the gallery. A veteran in the back stood up and had to be restrained by bailiffs. Reporters scribbled furiously. The sketch artists captured Brandon's dismissive smirk for posterity. Judge Caprio slammed his gavel. Order. I will have order in this court, or I will clear the room. Silence fell. But the damage was done. Brandon's arrogance was now burned into the national consciousness. It was time for Harold Whitmore to speak. His grandson Timothy wheeled him to the witness stand, helping him settle into the chair beside the microphone. Harold's hands shook as he adjusted the small American flag pin on his jacket. His voice, when he spoke, was soft but steady. Your Honor, Harold began, I've been trying to figure out what I want to say here today. I've been thinking about it for weeks, lying in that hospital bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering how things got so broken. He paused. I grew up during the Depression. My father worked 16-hour days just to put bread on the table. When I was 18, I enlisted. I went to Korea because that's what you did. You served your country. I watched boys I grew up with die in the snow. I came home and worked 37 years at the shipyard. I raised 3 children. I buried my wife. His voice cracked slightly, but he continued. I've never asked for anything from anyone. Not recognition. Not special treatment. Just respect. Basic human respect. The same respect I've given to every person I've ever met. He looked at Brandon for the first time. Son, I don't know what happened to you. I don't know what made you so angry at the world. But I want you to know something. I forgive you. Not because you deserve it. Not because you've asked for it. But because carrying hatred is too heavy a burden for an old man like me. Tears streamed down faces throughout the courtroom. Brandon stared at the floor. Judge Caprio removed his glasses and rubbed his eyes. When he spoke again, his voice had changed. It was harder now. Sharper. Mr. Mercer, I have sat on this bench for over 30 years. I have seen thousands of defendants come through this courtroom. I have seen genuine remorse. I have seen transformation. I have seen young people who made terrible mistakes and turned their lives around. But I have also seen something else. I have seen entitlement. I have seen cruelty. I have seen young men who believe that money and connections place them above the law, above basic decency, above the dignity of their fellow human beings. He leaned forward. "Which kind of person are you, Mr. Mercer?" Brandon said nothing. "That's what I thought." Judge Caprio turned to address a motion from the prosecution when a commotion near the back of the courtroom interrupted him. Someone was standing up. A tall man in a full dress uniform, medals gleaming on his chest. And then someone rose from the back of the tribunal. The courtroom fell into stunned silence. Captain Daniel Mercer stood in the last row, his police chief's uniform crisp and immaculate, his badge catching the fluorescent light. His face was carved from stone, but his eyes told a different story. They were red-rimmed, haunted, the eyes of a man who had not slept in weeks. No one had known he was there. He had slipped in through a side entrance, hidden among the crowd, wearing sunglasses and a coat over his uniform. He had watched his son's performance, the shrugs, the eye rolls, the casual dismissal of an elderly veteran's dignity, and something inside him had finally broken. Judge Caprio raised an eyebrow. "Captain Mercer, I didn't expect to see you here today." Daniel removed his cap and held it against his chest. "Neither did I, Your Honor. But I couldn't stay away. Not any more." The whispers in the courtroom swelled like waves. "Dad, what are you doing?" Brandon hissed. "Sit down. This is—" "Quiet." Daniel's voice cut through the room like a blade. He wasn't looking at his son. He was looking at the judge. "Your Honor, I know this is highly irregular. I know I have no official standing in these proceedings. But I am asking, I am begging, for permission to address the court." Judge Caprio studied him for a long moment. "Captain Mercer, you understand that anything you say could potentially be used in these proceedings?" "I do." "And you still wish to speak?" "I do." The judge glanced at the prosecution, then at the defense attorney, who looked like he was about to have a stroke. "Approach the bench." Daniel Mercer walked down the center aisle of the courtroom, and with every step, the weight of 30 years of law enforcement seemed to press down on his shoulders. He passed the reporters. He passed the veterans. He passed Harold Whitmore, and for a moment their eyes met. Daniel stopped. He turned to face the old man in the wheelchair. "Mr. Whitmore," Daniel said, his voice thick, "I don't have words. I don't have excuses. What my son did to you—" He stopped, struggling to compose himself. "I am so deeply, deeply sorry. You deserve better. This city deserves better. And God knows, you deserved better from me." Harold looked up at him. "I raised 3 boys," Harold said quietly. "I know what it is to worry about who they're becoming. You're not responsible for his actions, Captain. He's a grown man. But I am responsible for the man he became." Harold had no answer to that. Daniel turned away and continued to the front of the courtroom. "Captain Mercer," Judge Caprio said, "you have the floor." Daniel stood at the podium, gripping its edges so hard his knuckles turned white. For a long moment he didn't speak. He just looked at his son, really looked at him, as if seeing him clearly for the first time in years. "Brandon," he finally said, "do you remember when you were 8 years old and you found that injured bird in the backyard?" Brandon blinked. "What?" "You carried it inside. You wrapped it in a towel. You stayed up all night, feeding it water with an eyedropper. And when it died the next morning, you cried for 3 days. You were so gentle then, so full of compassion." Daniel's voice cracked. "What happened to that boy?" "Dad, this isn't—" "What happened to him?" The shout echoed through the courtroom. Brandon flinched. Daniel wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. "I'll tell you what happened. I happened. Your mother and I, we happened. We gave you everything. Every toy you wanted. Every car. Every designer jacket. Every time you got in trouble at school, I made calls. I made it go away. When you got into fights, I covered it up. When you got caught drinking underage, I had the charges dropped. I told myself I was protecting you. I told myself that's what fathers do. He shook his head. But I wasn't protecting you. I was destroying you. I was teaching you that rules don't apply to you. That consequences are for other people. That you could do whatever you wanted, hurt whoever you wanted, and Daddy would always be there to clean up the mess. He turned to face the judge. Your Honor, I know what people expect me to do. I know they expect me to use my position to help my son. To call in favors. To pressure the court. To make this all go away, the way I've made everything else go away. He straightened his spine. I'm not going to do that. A collective gasp rippled through the courtroom. In fact, I'm going to do the opposite. I am here today to tell this court and this country that I am stepping back. I am recusing myself from any involvement in this case. I have already spoken with the mayor and submitted my temporary resignation from the department until this matter is fully resolved. There will be no interference. There will be no favors. There will be no special treatment. He looked at his son. Brandon, I love you. I will always love you. But I will not save you from this. Not this time. Not ever again. You're going to face the consequences of what you've done. Real consequences. And maybe, that will be the thing that finally saves you. Brandon's face crumbled. For the first time since the trial began, his arrogance dissolved. His chin trembled. His eyes filled with tears. Dad, please. No, son. No more, please. No more excuses. You're going to stand before this judge like a man, and you're going to accept whatever punishment he decides. And then, if you have any decency left in you, you're going to spend the rest of your life trying to become the person Mr. Whitmore believes you can still be. Daniel turned back to the bench. Your Honor, I ask that you judge my son fairly. Not harshly because of who I am. Not leniently because of who I am. Fairly. According to the law. According to justice. He placed his police chief's badge on the edge of the podium. That's all I came here to say. The courtroom was utterly silent. Judge Caprio stared at the badge for a long moment. Then he looked at Captain Mercer, and something passed between the two men, a recognition, perhaps, of the terrible weight of duty and love. Captain Mercer, the judge said quietly. In 33 years on this bench, I have never witnessed a father show that kind of courage. What you have done today, it does not erase your son's crime. But it tells me something important about the kind of man you are. And it gives me hope about the kind of man your son might still become. Daniel nodded, unable to speak. He walked back through the courtroom, stopping once more beside Harold Whitmore. "Thank you," he whispered, "for your service, for your dignity, for showing my son what a real man looks like." Harold reached out and squeezed Daniel's hand. "Go sit with your boy," Harold said. "He needs his father now more than ever." Daniel walked to the defense table and sat down beside his son. Brandon was crying, truly crying, for the first time anyone could remember. Judge Frank Caprio took a full 2 minutes before he spoke again. He reviewed his notes. He looked at Harold. He looked at Daniel. He looked at Brandon, really looked at him, at the tears streaming down the young man's face, at the shattered arrogance, at the terrified child that had been hiding beneath all that bravado. And then he began. "Mr. Mercer," Judge Caprio said, "please stand." Brandon rose on shaking legs. His father stood beside him, one hand on his shoulder. I have thought long and hard about what to do with you today. I have received thousands of letters. I have been pressured by politicians, by media figures, by advocacy groups on all sides. Some want me to throw the book at you, to make you an example, to prove that no one is above the law. Others want me to show leniency, to consider your age, your lack of prior convictions, your family circumstances. He paused. But I am not interested in making examples. I am not interested in leniency for its own sake. I am interested in one thing, and one thing only: justice. Real justice. The kind that doesn't just punish, but transforms. The kind that doesn't just satisfy public outrage, but actually makes the world a little bit better. He leaned forward. Mr. Mercer, what you did to Harold Whitmore was despicable. It was cruel. It was the act of a man who has lost sight of his own humanity. And if I believed, truly believed, that you were beyond redemption, I would send you to prison for the maximum sentence allowed by law and not lose a moment's sleep. Brandon's breath caught. But I don't believe that. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. I believe that somewhere inside you is that 8-year-old boy who stayed up all night trying to save a wounded bird. I believe that your father's courage today, his willingness to sacrifice everything to force you to face the truth, has cracked open something in you that has been sealed shut for too long. And I believe that Mr. Whitmore, in his infinite grace, has shown you what mercy looks like, even when it is not deserved. Judge Caprio removed his glasses. Brandon Daniel Mercer, I hereby sentence you as follows. First, you will serve 180 days in the adult correctional institution, not in a minimum security facility, not in protective custody, in general population. You will experience what life is like for ordinary people who face the consequences of their actions. Brandon nodded, tears still flowing. Second, upon your release, you will complete 1,000 hours of community service, not picking up trash on the highway, but meaningful service. You will volunteer at the Veterans Affairs Medical Center right here in Providence. You will sit with men and women who sacrificed everything for this country. You will listen to their stories. You will help them with their meals, their physical therapy, their daily struggles. And you will learn what honor actually looks like. Third, you will write a formal letter of apology to Mr. Whitmore and his family, to be read aloud in this courtroom before your incarceration begins. Not some lawyer-drafted statement full of weasel words. Your words. From your heart. Fourth, you will pay full restitution for all of Mr. Whitmore's medical expenses, lost wages, and pain and suffering, the total amount to be determined by this court in consultation with independent assessors. And fifth, Judge Caprio looked at Harold Whitmore. If Mr. Whitmore is willing, and only if he is willing, you will meet with him, face to face, once a month for the next 2 years. Not to apologize again and again. Not to beg for forgiveness. But to learn. To listen. To understand what it means to live a life of dignity and service. He turned back to Brandon. Do you understand and accept these terms? Brandon's voice was barely a whisper. Yes, Your Honor. Do you have anything you wish to say? Brandon turned. He looked at his father first. Dad, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for who I've been. For what I've put you through. For making you choose between loving me and doing what's right. Daniel pulled his son into an embrace, holding him like he hadn't held him since he was a small boy. Just become the man I know you can be, Daniel whispered. That's all I've ever wanted. Then Brandon turned to Harold. He walked slowly to the elderly veteran's wheelchair and lowered himself to his knees. Mr. Whitmore, he said, his voice breaking, I don't deserve your forgiveness. I don't deserve anything from you. But I want you to know, I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of the grace you showed me today. I don't know if I'll ever get there. But I'm going to try. Harold looked down at the young man kneeling before him, and slowly, carefully, he reached out and placed his weathered hand on Brandon's head. "Son," he said, "I spent 3 years in Korea watching boys your age die in the snow. Good boys. Brave boys. Boys who never got the chance to make mistakes and learn from them. You have that chance. Don't waste it." Brandon nodded, unable to speak. "Now get up," Harold said gently. "A man doesn't grovel. He stands up, takes his punishment, and does better." Brandon rose. And for the first time since this whole nightmare began, something like hope flickered in his eyes. Epilogue. 14 months later. The Providence VA Medical Center was quiet on Sunday mornings. Brandon Mercer arrived at 6 a.m., the same as he did every week. He wore simple clothes now: jeans, a plain t-shirt, comfortable shoes. His designer jackets hung untouched in a closet he rarely opened. He had served his 180 days. He had completed over 700 hours of his community service. He had written that letter and read it aloud in court, sobbing so hard he could barely finish. And he had changed. Not overnight. Not easily. There had been dark days in prison, days when the old arrogance had tried to resurface, when other inmates had tested him, when he had wanted nothing more than to go back to being the person he used to be. But he hadn't. He had remembered his father's face, Harold's hand on his head, Judge Caprio's words about the boy who tried to save a wounded bird. And he had held on. Now, every Sunday morning, he came to the VA. He helped veterans with their breakfast. He pushed wheelchairs through the gardens. He sat with men who had no family, no visitors, no one to listen to their stories, and he listened. He learned about Normandy and Iwo Jima and Kisan and Fallujah. He learned about sacrifice and brotherhood and the weight of memories that never fade. He learned that heroism isn't about glory, it's about showing up day after day, even when no one is watching. And on this particular Sunday morning, a familiar face was waiting for him. Harold Whitmore sat in the garden, his wheelchair parked beneath an oak tree that had been there longer than either of them had been alive. His injuries had healed, mostly. He walked with a cane now. The doctors said he might always need it. But his eyes were bright, and his spirit was unbroken. "You're late," Harold said as Brandon approached. "Traffic. Traffic." Harold snorted. "When I was your age, we walked 30 miles through snow just to get yelled at by a sergeant. I know. They both laughed. It had become a ritual, these Sunday meetings. At first, they had been awkward, painful, full of long silences. But over the months, something unexpected had grown between them. Not quite friendship. Something deeper. The bond between a man who had lost his way and a man who had helped him find it again. "I have something for you," Harold said. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. "Mr. Whitmore, I can't." "You can and you will. Open it." Brandon opened the box. Inside was a medal. Bronze, slightly tarnished with age, hanging from a faded ribbon. Brandon's breath caught. "Is this?" "My bronze star. From Korea. I can't accept this. This is your—" "It's mine to give," Harold said firmly. "And I'm giving it to you. Not because you've earned it. You haven't. Not yet. But because I believe you will. One day, in your own way, you will do something that matters. Something that helps someone who can't help themselves. And when that day comes, I want you to look at this medal and remember that even an old man who you once knocked to the ground believed in you." Brandon clutched the medal to his chest. "Thank you," he whispered. "For everything. For forgiving me. For believing in me when I didn't deserve it." Harold smiled. "Just remember, son, we're all capable of darkness. We're all capable of light. The only thing that matters is which one we choose, day after day, for the rest of our lives. Brandon nodded. I'll choose light. I promise. I know you will. They sat together in the garden for another hour, watching the sun climb higher, watching other veterans being wheeled out for their morning air, watching life continue in all its messy, painful, beautiful complexity. And when Brandon finally rose to leave, Harold called after him. Brandon. Yes, sir. You're a good man. Not because you've never done wrong, but because you're trying to do right. Don't ever forget the difference. Brandon smiled, a real smile, the kind that comes from somewhere deep inside. I won't. As he walked back to his car, Brandon passed a young mother struggling to carry groceries while pushing a stroller. Without thinking, he stopped. Let me help you with those. She looked at him with surprise, then gratitude. Thank you. That's so kind. Brandon loaded her groceries into her car, waved goodbye to her toddler, and continued on his way. It was a small thing, but it was everything.